Would Trump free Ross? A look at SBF's Prisonmates, Eastern Europe's media purge, and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. First thing on the agenda, the Libertarian Convention was this weekend in Washington, D.C. I'm not really a party girl. I've always been more of an anarchist type. Although, who knows? I may come full circle. I'm going to have a conversation with Anthony Raimondo next week and just ask him how to use the process to kick the can of tyranny down the road, because I don't know. I'm getting worried about like the next lockdown or whatever. So I'm not like a super, but I've never really been a huge like Libertarian Party girl. So I don't follow the personalities, although I do know Angela McArdle. I've interviewed her. I like her. She's the chair, the party chair. And I think she's done a lot of really good things from when I talked to her and the changes that she wanted to make. They nominated this weekend Chase Oliver, who I can't believe I really didn't know him. I guess when his claim to fame is that he ran in a Senate race in Georgia, a razor thin one where Warnock won. And if all of those votes had gone to, it was probably Kelly, whatever, the other one who ran against Warnock, then she would have won. But so that's what always people worry about the Libertarian Party because of that. But I remember Shane Hazel did the exact same thing in the other Senate race. So that starts to make me wonder if it's super weaponized or what. But I mean, the real problem is either that we have this bizarrely bifurcated ideology and moral and political sensibilities that people are just right down the middle, half and half, and they're just incompatible, or they're so close together that you have to cut that line, that you go out of your way, which I think they do, to cut as close to that middle line as you can. And for me, the welfare warfare parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, just trade off welfare for warfare. I mean, that's what they're doing. And you get these guys in, Trump is no exception, who does stuff that's a violation of the Constitution and of my personal libertarian ideology. So this guy he is going to be the candidate for the Libertarian Party. His running mate is going to be a guy with like a really Dutch name, Mike Termot, I looked at his stuff. It looked good enough. The article on Politico said the Libertarian Party selected former Georgia Senate candidate Chase Oliver as their presidential nominee on Sunday, spurning appeals for support over the weekend from both Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It says the selection of Oliver, who has described himself as armed and gay and whose third-party candidacy helped force a runoff in the Georgia Senate race in 2022, came a day after Trump suggested he himself would be the best nominee for the party, drawing a sustained chorus of boos. So when Trump said that he should get the support, it's kind of, it's his style. It's like, well, if you want to keep being the losers, if you want to win, I guess the only reason you wouldn't support me is because you want to lose. But people were booing and booing Trump when he was speaking, and they had a lot of, if you look at the pictures or the videos, whatever, they had a lot of placards, free Ross placards, all pre-printed, which always makes me sus that somebody decided that would be the issue. But if there's ever going to be an issue, it should be free Ross Ulbricht, who should not be in jail. It's a horrible story. I've done shows on it before. If you don't know who Ross Ulbricht is, Ulbricht, look it up. He was set up by the government. Two of the investigators who were instrumental in putting him in jail went to jail themselves for malfeasance in his case, and he was not allowed to bring that up in his own trial. So he's the guy who was accused of murder for something that happened on his dark website. And it seemed to me from beginning to end, he was set up. The whole thing was awful. And he's still in jail. He's been in jail for at least 10 years. I mean, it could make you cry. So it won't be too little, but it'll be pretty late if Ross is freed. And what Trump said, and when Trump was leaving office, I said, I'll never say another bad word against this guy ever if he just frees Ross. There's no reason not to. Just do it. but he didn't. And he said this time, he said, if you vote for me, the first thing I will do is free Ross. But I'm thinking that what he was saying is, if you vote for me to be your nominee, for me to be on your ticket, which they didn't do. And actually, he had not filed the paperwork. So they couldn't have done it. And one of these articles, maybe this one, said Angela McArdle, or just said like the party chair, said that he wasn't qualified. And it sounded, the way they said it, sounded very fishy. But he didn't fill out the paperwork. He knew what he was doing. That's come on. So he wrote on social media in response to that, he could not have accepted the nomination anyway because he was the Republican Party's presumptive nominee. Kennedy was eliminated in the first round of voting, receiving only 19 votes. I guess RFK was, interested. I don't know. That the idea being a lot of these votes, Kennedy and libertarians specifically, are votes against. They protest to the liberal fascist center. That's what he used to say. I'm registering my protest to the liberal fascist center. So he also said, I thought it was funny, he said, in the last year, I've been indicted by the government on 91 different things. So if I wasn't a libertarian before, I sure as hell am a libertarian now, which sounded a little bit like libertarians are soft on crime. I would say as long as your crime is don't touch me or my stuff, libertarians are not soft on it. On the contrary, probably. He said, though, he continued, I don't like Joe Biden. I don't throw people in jail for disagreeing with me. So I wonder if there would be a libertarian Trump. We could call him Lump or Limp. But it was funny because when he was talking, the sign behind him, which is this libertarian slogan, be ungovernable. And who could be more ungovernable than this guy? Except for the other created person, Elon Musk. So I think there's been some controversy around Chase Oliver's positions. Like one of them was that if companies wanted to implement vax mandates, they could fire you. And he was okay with that because, of course, a business can do whatever it wants. It can discriminate against people. It can fire people it doesn't like for no reason at all, especially an individually owned business. I don't know about a public business, because this is what happens. This is one of those examples of libertarians die by the sword, but they don't live by it. The idea is that, yes, if you have absolute property rights, there would be no issue. But businesses would have absolutely every right to discriminate on vax people and anything they want. It's their private property. But they don't. And they also, you get a like a license to start a business. There's all these restrictions that businesses have to jump through to establish themselves. So if you don't want to work for the guy who's a vax, crazed, vax mandator, then you could start your own business theoretically. That's what I used to say about investment banking. I worked at a bank and it was extremely discriminatory against women, but it was a publicly traded company that made assurances to me when I got the job there that they treated women equally. I had another job I applied for, which was well known for discriminating against women. And literally I heard from the inside, I did not get the job because that guy just doesn't hire women. But it was a private company. He owned it. So I was like, he has every right to do that. But I used to say to people that if I could have, I would have, with all the other gals, opened the place across the street that said, Chick Bank, we work harder for less. Because if that's the way it was, if there was really discrimination, the free market, if it is a free market, would eliminate that. It would eliminate these kind of businesses, but it's not like that. And the businesses themselves were getting inordinate pressure to do this stuff, and their own businesses were being threatened. Look at what Andrew Cuomo said. He said, I had no right to close those businesses down. But so anybody who actually did it basically volunteered. I mean, he said that after the fact. He didn't say, ask Josh Steinman how true that felt. So in a totalitarian situation, I think you have to quibble about the laws that are emerging from a highly controlled and illegitimate situation. So it's easy to say that's the problem that with that what I mean with the libertarians die by the sword, but they don't live by it. It's easy to take the hardline libertarian position and say, well, they can do whatever they want. It's their business. But that's how but it's not a free market. So if we have to live in this system, we can discuss ideology, but we have to look at these. We have to be a little we have to accept that we are in such a system. So these guys also have the immigration policy, which used to be just pure open borders. And I thought that too. But of course, it's been weaponized. And once you remove private property rights, then you have to care. Once you can't actually control who crosses your own personal border, then part of your property rights have been removed to the border that's governed by the laws that you have to obey. So these guys have a different immigration policy from open borders for good reasons, but that's a compromise that just to live in this world, because we're not headed towards anarcho-capitalism. I think we're headed towards social fascism, whatever, world governments of the highest order. So, and by the way, Brzezinski had said in The Crisis of Democracy, what do you do when people object to government policy that you need to implement? And he said, make sure that everybody works in or for an institution. Their livelihood depends on it, and they have no democratic say. So big corporation, a government, a school, a labor union, whatever. And that's the plot. You got to admit that that's the plot. So another big, more news out of Israel and Gaza, and more of this, oh my gosh, we're in over our heads kind of thing. Israel, it says Netanyahu calls civilian deaths in Rafah a tragic mistake. Israeli tanks close in on central Rafah as global uproar grows. Backlash over civilian deaths in Gaza airstrike amplifies challenge for Israel's campaign against Hamas. I continue to think that this is the onward march towards what I'll say is the 3-state solution. So it's not Israel controlling Gaza or Palestine controlling Gaza. It's the U.S. controlling Gaza and having to answer the call, the begging of the world for the U.S. to march in there, and I guess to get the Israeli right-wingers on board. I don't know. But when I talk about this, I criticize or call out a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters on university campuses as seeming astroturf. JJ from the UK, very long time listener and friend whom I've visited in the UK, met him personally, originally from Atlanta. He said, I haven't seen reports of paid protesters, even from the many pro-Israel pundits I've run across. When our media mentions the protests, it's only to accuse them of anti-Semitism and frightening the poor Jewish students, even though Jewish students are in the camps. So I did actually see reports that this stuff was Soros funded. Like the New York Post did one. George Soros is paying student radicals who are fueling nationwide explosion of Israel-hating protests. U.S. CPR provides up to $8,000 almost for its community-based fellows, and between around $3,000 for its campus-based fellows in return for spending 8 hours a week organizing campaigns led by Palestinian organizations. And in their little ad, it's asking for people who are 15 to 35 years old in the U.S., leaders in local organizations that have a base interest in Palestine and are ready to build a campaign targeting a government, institutional, or corporate target. Now, even if this is true, even if the movement has been infiltrated by these Soros types, that's exactly the point. That this guy, Soros, and these people are taint agents who Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that they got in there to the protests, organized them preemptively, which is why I always thought, like, the vax lawsuits were so important to have people on our side win them so that, like, controlled opposition couldn't preemptively go in and lose or win on a bad argument, set a bad precedent. So the first mover has a tremendous advantage. But regardless of how that stuff looks, and maybe I'm too, like, just, always looking for the angle, but the the complaints about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians go back like 70 years or however long since the beginning, since the 40s at least. Actually, I have this interesting book, Lawrence in Arabia, New York Times bestseller. Very interesting about that time period. Lots of great footnotes. But I mean, I don't even hear people really talk about the blockade. I assume the blockade is still there, with the exception of a big US port bringing stuff in there. I think that's probably up and running by now. The fact that they are not permitted to engage in self-governance, not allowed to return. They don't have the right of return even when they have title to the land. I know a Christian Palestinian here who has title and is not permitted to have the land. I actually should talk to him. And of course, all the leveling of Gaza that's happening right now, and the very sketchy kind of narrative surrounding October 7th. I mean, but we don't talk about that, right? I'm talking about the protesters all the time and how I think that they're there to invalidate those complaints. But the whole thing, in my opinion, I just come from a place of, I don't have a lot of hope for justice in any of these conflicts, in any of the war. I want to talk about that after we get to some comments about, I think, what did they call it? It was in a Russia Today article. I think they called it the Great War Party, or the Great Party of War, and meant by that the entire Western alliance. So that's going to be an interesting story. But yeah, I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to have justice no matter what outcome. It's far too late for justice, I'm sure. Okay. Speaking of war pigs, I think another article made me think war pigs in space, like pigs in space, war pigs in space. Pentagon prepares for space warfare. Pentagon officials open up about potential threats as China's presence in orbit grows and Russia shows interest in gear that can destroy satellites. They always say that it's defensive. Everything they do is defensive. We're building a space force to control the entire world and to shoot the satellites out of the sky and to shoot stuff on the ground. One of the elements of this is the directed energy weapon. It's right there in the article in the journal, straight out of their own stuff. High-powered lasers or microwaves that can be used to fry satellites' internal electronics. But I'm pretty sure it can hit here too, like down on Earth too. So they're definitely offensive. They said they will not talk about their offensive uses, that it's reactionary. Russia came in and said it's not reactionary. We're not doing this stuff. You guys are making stuff up. So our guy said, I have to counter the threat to ensure our space capabilities that we have built our way of life on will be available well into the future. He's talking about like GPS and stuff. I don't like it. I don't want any of that stuff. I have to use it. I mean, I could choose to just go completely off the grid, but that life is not for everyone. And I have a right to what my forebears built over the millennia with their own hands. Little labor theory of value there, but it's true. I shouldn't have to abandon all of human progress because these guys want to force me into a highly controlled technocratic future and then bring me space war to defend it. Just, I don't like government research into science. That is where this all started. It's where it disconnected need from investment. it should. Oh, you always have to have a marginal return, the marginal, incremental value of capital expenditure, and this idea that it's inefficient, that we need governments to control research and spending and consolidate it is wrong. It's a disaster. It's a threat to humanity. Anyway, so that's what these people are doing. And the Russian's UN ambassador said he didn't understand what this guy's talking about. This U.S. military official. The Kremlin has accused the U.S. of seeking to militarize space and called reports that Russia is developing a nuclear anti-satellite system fabrication. They call their investment responsible counter space. That's what our guy is talking about. But on a little more down-to-earth level of the Great War Party, there is NATO training for nuclear strike on Russia is happening, says the Russian general. He says the U.S.-led bloc poses a military threat to the country. The head of the Border Guard Service has warned. NATO intelligence operations close to the Russian border are on the rise. Forces of the alliance, that's what I thought was interesting. He calls it the alliance, so like we think of that as like the allies and the axis. It's like allies are the bad guys, are intensifying military training in which they work out military scenarios against the Russian Federation, including nuclear strikes on our territory. But this is what I thought was really interesting. And I guess I didn't know this. But of course, like it was true, because this is what Obama promised the two Vlads not to do until after his election or something about the ICBMs. Or ICBMs are intercontinental, but the closer ones have to be in countries that will harbor them for us. So Russia criticized NATO's nuclear sharing scheme, under which some American weapons are stored in non-nuclear nations, so-called, including Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. And Russians say non-host nations are involved in the training exercises on how to deploy the weapons. He said that happened just weeks before the Ukraine conflict escalated into open hostility. At the same time, now here the tables are turned. Russia says they are doing an exercise in Belarus and is decided last year as a reaction to what's happening in Ukraine to store part of its arsenal on Belarusian territory to counterbalance NATO's schemes and rising tensions, which I actually believe. However, in looking into some of this stuff, which I'm going to talk about after the comments, things that are happening over in Eastern Europe, it was called to my attention the devastating pictures of the devastation in Chechnya during, I don't know if it was the 2008 thing. I have to brush up on that, but that was under Putin's command, and pretty, have you ever heard of what MacArthur said about South Korea? I mean, it's not that, I don't know. It looks total to me. I mean, I guess you'd have to zoom out to see how total, but so I'm not saying that Russia are good guys or any of that. I just feel like this escalation is disingenuous and dangerous. All right. So a few kind of quick hits. We have some time before comments. Bill Walton died at the age of 71 from colon cancer. What was reported as a long battle with cancer, but very few people would say, or actually there's no reporting on when he got it. And of course, I don't know anything about sports. So when my husband said, "Oh, Bill Walton died," I was like, Sam Walton's son? I don't know. So he said, no, he's a basketball player. And he was a big basketball player, like literally in the 70s and 80s. He played for the Celtics, the Clippers, and the Trailblazers. He was also a broadcaster later. He went to UCLA. Of course, I'm sure my husband is well aware of him because he's a big deadhead. I mean, he liked them all: fish, tie-dyes, whatever. He was a vegan. My husband is not a vegan. He's from Texas. As a matter of fact, we had a huge brisket yesterday, which he smoked for like 8 hours. So that was very fun. Could be why I'm getting fat. So colon cancer, I have always felt my father had it and they gave him surgery for it, which killed him. Not advised for someone of his age and heart problems. But my nephew had it and died at the age of 41. And I concluded, I think it's a reasonable thing to wonder about anyway, that millennials are being hit with colon cancer. There's an incredible spike with millennials. And I think it's pharma. I think it's big pharma. I remember my nephew was on Accutane and Prozac for a long time at the same time. And Accutane, they actually had to change their name because of the problems it causes with people's colons. So I've always been like connected colon cancer with pharma. But I looked into Bill Walton, and he was a very outspoken political activist. He was anti-Vietnam. He was a vegan. He was very anti-government. He even was connected with the people like the Symbian Liberation Army and the Patty Hearst thing, or he was friends of them. But I guess he got slapped down pretty hard because when they did a little documentary about him or miniseries, he didn't want any of that stuff in it. So he removed that. So I figured that he had what American Everyman would say, got his mind right from the Cool Hand Luke movie. He got his mind right. And however, I did find an article, which I have in the show notes here, from The Nation, trying to give him a hat tip for all of his activism. And I don't think he really wanted that hat tip, but it was fairly recent. But I found even more recent. So they're saying he had this long battle with cancer. And I just figured since he got his mind right, he probably got vaccinated because he was a broadcaster. And, but there was I just couldn't find it. Maybe my research skills are weakening, or maybe it's buried or whatever. I was just trying to find the inevitable tweet like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Look at my Band-Aid. But I couldn't find it. But I did find, so this was in 2022. So it's widely reported that he had a long battle with cancer. And I don't know if you've known anybody who's had a long battle with cancer, but 2 years is not a long battle with cancer. Less than 2 years, I would say, is not a long battle with cancer. So with that being my floor, I read an article which discussed a conversation he had with Al Franken in May 2022. And this is straight out of the thing, straight out of that article. Walton appreciates his newfound health. He said he feels fantastic. He shared his feelings with Franken regarding his physical and mental health. I'm happy. I'm happy because I got another chance in my life when Dr. Garfin fixed my spine. His career was plagued with injuries, which some people blamed on his veganism, but he also had some, I guess, like his bones in his feet were weird. And I think he broke his spine when he was in college. Anyway, he said, I spent half my adult life in the hospital. I spent my entire adult life never thinking I'd be happily married. And I'm madly in love with my life, Lori, more so now than ever before. And I'm as healthy as can be. I can't do a lot of things. I walk for function, not for fun, but I can go places, and I can go places on my bike. But mostly I can go places in my mind. I can read, I can think, I can dream, I can hope, and I can plan for tomorrow. So I'm sad for him. He seemed like an interesting guy. And I hate to always go down that rabbit hole of, what really happened here. Oh, jab or no jab. But that's the world we live in. We've just accept these deaths and people we know. And I woke up, when I was reflecting on this, thinking of all the people I know who died from complications of the whatever. I don't want to get taken down. It's too late. I have to go back actually and take some of my videos down that got me in a little bit of problems recently. So if my video disappears, go to Rumble. I don't think I have to take it. Oh, go to rockfin.com/Monica Perez. I actually have a lot of free stuff on there too. Okay. So I was going to do an update on SBF Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm going to have to wait. I'm not sure we're going to have time for that. Let's go to comments. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone from Stuart. Jack made it. Hi, Jack. Oh my gosh. Jack Burton says that the libertarians have officially confirmed they are fake and gay. You know, I don't use that expression myself, but it definitely applies to a libertarian hero, Edward Snowden. I was thinking that, like, they still don't get that. Yes, it's so nice to have the live show. Trump was just working on his comedy act. I see your comment, Jack. I think that will definitely get me taken down. Angus says, so tired of seeing the Trump family out there grifting to raise money, selling Bibles. Yeah, that's pretty tasteless. The Trump black card, etc. If he's such a rich man, why is he grifting? I never thought he was rich. I thought the thing that was going to make him rich was that post office in DC. But even that, he ended up selling for way less than he should have been able to sell it for if he had managed it correctly. I had read a book by, I think, Tim O'Neill, something like that. Tim O'Brien, I don't know, called Trump Nation. And he said he's not that rich. And Trump sued him, but then dropped the suit, which, I don't know. Oh, but yeah. So Jack's saying he ain't rich yet. You know what will make him rich? If that Truth Social meme stock holds up, not the company. That's what I didn't see coming. It's just the stock. Let's see how much he gets out of it, or how much he may have been able to pledge that already, use the stock as money without actually selling it. I don't know. But I think his hush money trial, they're in closing arguments today. I'm sorry I don't cover that. I just don't care. I get that it's a setup for something, but I don't care. Renee likes lump. The libertarian Trump is lump or limp. Hi, Bill. Angus hears that Trump plays 4D chess, but he thinks he's playing 3D strip saw. That's getting dirty. So by the time I got to the end of it, I'm like, that sounds a little dirty. Bill says you don't own property, you lease it from the government. And sadly, that's true. So I looked into it, and Croatia is one of the few places that does not charge property taxes, so that you can actually own your property outright, which you cannot here. You can't prepay your property taxes. You have to have it at the moment. So they can, if they raise it to 100% or 1,000%, that's all they have to do I mean, if they could get away with it. Oh, China and Taiwan. Yeah, I'll have to write that down on my here. I'll write that down for Thursday. Okay. Do I maintain balance? Brad says Monica maintains balance like a good mother would. I can't remember what I was saying. I better get on the Taiwan thing. Uh-oh. Shouts out to Brad. Courtney. They like these people. Okay, so now people are talking to each other in the chat. Which I love. I absolutely love it. But if this gets if I can't keep up on the comments myself, I'll have to employ a volunteer to put little stars on them so I can get to them. Another Trump farce, Space Force. That's right. That was a Trump thing. If you can't say something nice. No, I will say, Brad's talking about Dr. Shiva. I will say, I've told this before. He came out from his MIT classroom talking about how bad adjuvants are. And my reaction was, well, I guess they must have a vaccine coming that doesn't have adjuvants in it. And lo, I don't know. Okay. All right. So that people are chatting. That's great. Please keep it up. And I am going to move on to what I think will be the last story of the show because it's pretty long. It's a pretty long story and it leads into the clip, the crazy clip, most ridiculous clip ever. Okay. So I went to see how the Slovakian president Fico is doing because I don't know what to think about this. Orban seems real, Orban seems like the right-wing guy who is trying to close the borders in Hungary. He does stuff the EU clearly does not like. He's not supporting Ukraine. I don't know to what extent when people do just resist the West, they are forced to or choose to or are always, quote, in bed with Russia. If it's really like that, then Russia, to the extent that it's fighting a good fight in any regard, anywhere, once it gets like that, truly bipolar again, you are or what do they, yeah, bipolar, the unipolar world, modified, I forget what they call it. Polar, I guess. Then it's going to get ugly because of this escalation stuff. Even if somebody wants to be good, they can't be because the way we are definitely at fault with that escalation stuff. I can't blame, I'm not sure if they are also, but I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, so then Slovakia, the left-wing guy left office, he came back, remade as a right-wing guy in the image of Orban, and then he gets shot while he's promoting this media law. And I said, as soon as he got shot, it's like, if he survives and then they use this to suppress the media, then that's going to look like a setup to me. And he is recovering and they are using that incident to suppress the media, and this is where it gets hard to understand. Orban is vetting all the Western infiltration from his media and all of the, George Soros stuff, which causes color revolutions, like establish fifth columns and everything. Is that really what they're trying to do in Slovakia? I don't know, but it made me think of the bigger picture. They're definitely trying to do it here. And it's one of those things where they don't want them to do it, but we do it. We obviously do it in two ways. One, we just suppress our media. Like we have these government basically sponsored or initiated media companies, and they have rules and they push us down and all of that. But there's Georgia is also doing this with the media, and Georgia is a really interesting case but anyway, just to wrap it up about Slovakia, I don't know what that guy is up to. This is definitely an actual info war. This is an info war. Clear as day. So that led me to see what's happening in Georgia. So an EU official tries to get out of having been caught in what this Georgian prime minister says was basically a death threat. Oliver Varhelyi has claimed that his reference to the assassination attempt in Slovakia was misunderstood. So Georgia is also passing one of these media laws. And before I forget, I heard today Robert De Niro was outside of the Trump trial or nearby saying he wants to sow chaos, hear it in the world. Then the cops from January 6th were saying he promotes political violence. So it's political violence, just like the stuff in Slovakia, that's bringing our own media suppression here. So we're definitely getting it. We might not legislate it because that's harder to get away with, but we'll do it through the back door, just like SIPA and CISPA and SOPA or whatever it's called. All right, but in Georgia, they passed the Transparency of Foreign Influence Act last week. It requires NGOs, media outlets, and individuals receiving more than 20% of their funding from abroad to register as entities promoting the interests of a foreign power and disclose their donors. I actually was wondering that with Georgia. I mean, if you're going to have a democracy, you're going to call it a democracy, maybe you should have a law like this in states, because Georgia turned purple because of like the film industry and foreign money, California money coming in. So people blame the libertarian, but it's probably more like this kind of thing, like outsiders wanting to undermine. And, you can, I don't know. So I understand the problem. I didn't when I was younger, but I do understand it now. So while the act was vetoed by the president of Georgia, Salome Zurabichvili, chick, but Parliament is expected to override it. And then, so Parliament's supposed to override it, but our press says it's a deeply unpopular law. It's called the Russian law because it's similar to legislation enacted in Moscow in 2022, which was seen as a way to stifle criticism in the Kremlin. Stacey Abrams was over there working on the Yukos oil, like democracy initiative or whatever. Kissinger was on the board. Her job as an intern there, one of her many international interns. She's the imaginary governor of Georgia, of the state of Georgia. So she was over there teaching kids, quote, about democracy. That I immediately was like, this is foreigners infiltrating the democratic or political process of other countries. So we definitely do it. And if they want to keep it out, it's their sovereign right to do whatever they want. However, the U.S. State Department threatened Georgia with sanctions if it went ahead with the legislation and said that Washington may have to rethink its relationship with them. So we will sanction them if they don't let us infiltrate their press. But because we need to, as my son said, we need to protect our democracy. So there's no sovereignty, but we do it to them and they're not allowed to do it to us because we have, it says in one of the Russian stuff, there's more stringent foreign influence laws in the US, the UK, and other Western nations. Yeah. So in Georgia, it seems to me that there actually are factions there, in that the Georgian, there's like a black ops, an all volunteer Georgian troop group, whatever, division in Ukraine right now, fighting on the side of the Nazis. And this, I think they were instrumental in that original, the protest that had the snipers that started the whole coup in Ukraine in 2014. They were Georgians. And the president is obviously pro-Western, but the prime minister is not pro-Western. So there seems to be factions there. And this might be the reason why. There's a church of Georgia, like the Orthodox Catholic or whatever, some kind of Orthodox Georgian church that's extremely powerful. It's as powerful as the government. And I was thinking, like, this is my theory of the Enlightenment, or I don't know what to call it, the Enlightenment, but of like just the amount of innovation and progress that happened in Europe versus, say, China, which could arguably have been expected to have more and more people, more probably smarter. But I always thought, because we had the church as a counterbalance to the government, the individual had some power and had some, even the two powers were at odds, so they couldn't actually have total power over the individual. Maybe Georgia has that kind of thing because the government isn't all powerful. Maybe they have a place to incubate some independent politics. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to crack the code on on these things, which is why the US should not be involved in any foreign affairs, because like this, any foreign entanglements, because we claim to be a democratic republic ruled by and for the people, but we can't, it's impossible to know it's impossible to know. We need to respect the sovereignty of others. American exceptionalism is no bueno. So Kobakidze, the prime minister, said the U.S. pressure to drop the law is insulting blackmail. He said that these NGOs could foment a color revolution in Tbilisi. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce these words. Along the lines of Ukraine's 2014 coup and the serious consequences of the Georgian Maidan. They don't want a Georgian Maidan. He said that the EU commissioner warned him during a recent phone call that the West would take a number of measures against him if his government pressed ahead with the law. While listing these measures, he mentioned, you see what happened to Fico, and you should be very careful. This, the PM wrote. So he said, we're used to this kind of insulting blackmail. He said, the parallel drawn with the attempted assassination of Robert Fico reminds us that in the form of the global war party, we are dealing with an extremely dangerous force that will do anything to bring chaos to Georgia. So a lot of Georgians, though, absolutely hate Russia. And who can blame them after the absolute devastation? I guess because Georgia and Chechnya are right next to each other. I don't know. But there was terrible devastation there. And I can see why they don't like it. But at the same time, Russia is actually encouraging immigration into Georgia. So there's a lot of Russians going into Georgia. And it made me wonder, like, is Putin really like trying to invade or trying to recapture all the USSR countries? I think it's really Georgia is the hot spot with that. But, it makes you realize there are no heroes. Anyway. On I would say a lighter note, because it's so preposterous. However, it's also horrifying in its cringiness. So have you ever seen Sergei Lavrov? He's the foreign minister, I think, he's the statesman of Russia. And he's not on our side, right? But he's just he's ballsy. He's smart. He calls it like he sees it. When I hear him, he's telling the truth. Sergei Lavrov is the Russian premier statesman. Our premier statesman, Secretary of State, is Antony Blinken. And our most serious entanglement at the moment, you could argue it's Gaza, but I feel like that is not our official entanglement yet, Ukraine. That he goes over to Ukraine, our most senior statesman. And I'm going to just leave you with what he did. And I will say, try not to be too vulgar on the show. But the State Department's head has disappeared up its own butt. Check this out. Watch how he's trying not to smile, even though he's so psyched. So psyched to be there.
And listen, I know this is a really, really difficult time. Your soldiers, your citizens, particularly in the Northeast and Kharkiv, are suffering tremendously. But they need to know, you need to know. The United States is with you. So much of the world is with you. And they're fighting, not just for free Ukraine, but for the free world. And the free world is with you too. So maybe we can try something?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if we can pull this off.
Come on out here. Yeah.